right, let's get started. Good morning, everybody. I am Tom Cash. I'm the Public Safety Manager for the Golden Rain Foundation here in Rossmoor. I want to thank everyone for zooming in for Rossmoor's fourth installment in a series of Rossmoor wildfire safety presentations. A big thank you for the previous presentations from PG&E, Contra Costa County Fire Protection District, San Jose State University's Fire Ecology Department, and the Contra Costa County Office of Emergency Services. The reason we do these presentations is quite simple. California has moved into the era of mega fires. Over the past years, fires have gotten worse and worse. Experts are relating it to many things, including California's long-term drought, global warming, poor forestry management, and the need for safer practices. This is why GRF has brought you this series of wildfire safety presentations throughout the fire season. This year's fire season was expected to be very bad and has now demonstrated that it is very bad. We have two mega fires in the Sierra Nevadas and are watching the mass evacuation of South Lake Tahoe currently. For this month's presentation, I reached out and invited the City of Walnut Creek's newest police chief, Chief Jamie Knox, to be introduced to our community and say a few words. I also reached out to CAL FIRE's Battalion Chief, Brian Jabroni, to present us with his CAL FIRE presentation and talk to us about what are the responsibilities of CAL FIRE in this era of mega fires and what are they doing differently or need to be successful. I hope you will find this program extremely valuable in helping you and our community better prepare for a wildfire situation. As always, we have assembled a panel of experts to help answer questions that may fall outside the presenter's roles and responsibilities. Before I continue, I want to give Golden Rain Foundation CEO Tim O'Keefe a chance to speak to us all. Tim?
All right, thanks, Tom. And I want to thank everybody for being here today, especially Chief Knox and Chief Jim Brony. This is, as you know, as Tom mentioned, our fourth attempt at trying to educate our community on wildfire preparation and emergency preparedness. And the fires that are currently spiraling somewhat out of control throughout parts of Northern California have got everybody I know on edge. I want to remind everyone that Golden Rain and the Mutuals are committed to fire safety and preparedness, and we spend more than $200,000 every year mitigating the risk to the Rossmoor community. In 2018 and 2019, there were 3 wildfires that encroached into Rossmoor that were caused by wild animals interacting with PG&E equipment. In June, there was a wildfire on Rockledge, which was caused by an undetermined nature, but it was under PG&E distribution lines. So we know that we're not immune to danger, and we had PG&E here in April to discuss with the community their vegetation management and wildfire safety programs. And I want to remind everyone that a year ago, in January of 2020, following a year-long effort, Golden Rain updated its emergency operations plan to specifically address wildfire, and we worked closely with the Fire Protection District, the city, the county, EPO, CERT, and the Red Cross to better be prepared in the event that evacuations were required in Rossmoor. And I also want to remind everyone that we've learned through wildfire management and evacuation planning that these are 2 of the 3 very important elements. The third is individual preparation. So I want to take this opportunity to remind everyone once again that Rossmoor's Emergency Preparedness Organization has outstanding resources on their website to assist Rossmoor residents in their planning. And you can get there by going to rossmoorepo.org. So we're pleased that CAL FIRE and the police department have agreed to conduct today's event, and they want to demonstrate their ongoing commitment to keeping the Rossmoor community safe. So with that, we'll listen to their presentation today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Tim. I'd like to introduce our expert panel here today, then introduce Chief Knox and hand over the presentation to CAL FIRE Battalion Chief Brian Jimbroni. Today we have from the Contra Costa County Fire Protection District, Fire Marshal Chris Blockman. From the City of Walnut Creek, Deputy City Manager Carla Hansen, I believe she's joining us a little bit later. From the Walnut Creek Police Department, Lieutenant Bruce Jower. From Contra Costa County Office of the Sheriff, Office of Emergency Services, Emergency Planning Coordinator Julie Beach. From the Golden Rain Foundation, CEO Tim O'Keefe, of course. Incredibly smart landscape manager Rebecca Pullen. And lastly, Rossmoor's very own rock star, Emergency Preparedness Organization, EPO President Fran Gibson. They're all here to answer any questions that may fall into their respective roles and expertise. So I want to introduce the newest Walnut Creek Police Chief and share some quick information about him. Chief Knox grew up in Roseville, California, and began his law enforcement career with the Rossmoor Police Department. In early 2015, Chief Knox accepted a position with the Novato Police Department as a captain. During his tenure at Novato, he served as the city's emergency services coordinator. And in 2017, Chief Knox joined the San Leandro Police Department as a captain and now has been appointed the newest chief of police for the city of Walnut Creek. Chief Knox is a member of the American Society of Evidence-Based Policing and has served as an adjunct faculty member at 3 higher education institutions. He holds a bachelor's of science degree in emergency management and a master's of science degree in organizational leadership. He's also a graduate of the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia, and the Senior Management Institute for Police in Boston, Massachusetts. Chief, the Zoom floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, I do have an extensive background in emergency management. My undergrad degree is in emergency management with a heavy emphasis on disaster preparedness and FEMA response. And so you're in good company today. I love this stuff. We don't put enough emphasis on it in this country, I think, and especially in the state with all of the fires that we've seen over the past 3 or 4 years. It's just really unprecedented. And now more than ever, it's important to take responsibility for your own disaster preparedness as residents. And my understanding is there are some challenges in Rossmoor. By the way, you said I worked at Rossmoor Police Department, which was probably sounded great to everybody, but it was actually Rockland where I did most of my career. And we had a lot of open space there. Over the course of 20 years, when I first started, it was 30,000 people, and now it's close to 70. So a lot of development, but always challenges with fire access and open space. And how that affects us is if there were an evacuation event, which we're going through right now, we're going to send a team of 4 people to help with the Caldor fire. Both for looting protection, but also evacuation duties. Is just logistically getting people out of there and looking at a map of Rossmoor. There's really only one way in and one way out when you think about the residents there driving out. So there are certainly some challenges, and I'd like to go out and tour that property and just get a better lay of the land. And I've already reached out to Tom to make that happen. But I just want to let everybody know that we're thinking about all of our residents in this very challenging time in California. But it's definitely on my radar just because of the amount of open space we have in Walnut Creek, and especially the geographical challenges of Rossmoor. So thanks for having me. And this goes till 11, I think, but I do have another appointment, so I may need to sneak off a little bit early, but I will stay for as long as I can.
Great, totally understand, Chief. Thank you. Our next guest is from CAL FIRE. I reached out to CAL FIRE in an effort to learn more about them and their role. I was quickly directed to CAL FIRE Brian Gimbroni and told he is a star there and can help you with anything you need. If you didn't know, a portion of Rossmoor falls under a state response area, an SRA, and we are surrounded to our south by an SRA with the Los Trompas Wilderness. Today, we will learn what does that mean for us here in Rossmoor. So I'm very excited to have Chief Gimbroni here. And Chief Gimbroni, the floor is yours.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'll give you a little background on myself. I worked for CAL FIRE since 1998, so this is my 23rd fire season. I'm a battalion chief. I currently supervise the Contra Costa and San Joaquin battalions. Santa Clara, I work for the Santa Clara unit. We're broken into different units statewide. Santa Clara covers Alameda, Contra Costa, San Joaquin, Stanislaus, and Santa Clara County itself. So we cover the 5 counties with 18 fire engines. I'll go into my PowerPoint, and then if there's any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. So we've lost a lot of homes in the recent fires, and I just want to emphasize that we do the best we can, but we can't always save every home. And this home actually had really good defensible space. But just sometimes with the construction of the buildings themselves, we can't always save all of them. So a little bit about CAL FIRE. We started out as the Division of Forestry and then changed our name to the Department of Forestry, and then ultimately we become more politically correct and call ourselves CAL FIRE. And we're part of the Natural Resources Branch of the state of California. We were established in 1885, disbanded in 1893 due to funding, and we originally started out as a law enforcement agency, not a fire department. In 1905, California had the ability to appoint local fire wardens, and these fire wardens were given the responsibility to maintain fire patrols. So once again, we were not a fire department, we were a law enforcement agency. So the primary responsibilities in early years was to protect the state's timber. Timber is a huge money generator in the state of California, and we were out there enforcing forest practice laws and not allowing folks to illegally cut timber down and use it for their own personal needs. And then the obviously right now our largest or the thing that we're trying to protect is a watershed, because water is a huge commodity in the state of California. So today there's approximately 85 million acres in California that are classified as wildland. CAL FIRE is considered an all-risk fire department, and when I say all-risk, most folks think of CAL FIRE as just a wildland agency. We actually have more employees that work for local government fire departments that contract with the state of California. So the big red fire engines that everybody sees driving down the street, we actually have more employees on those style of engines than we do on our wildland engines. CAL FIRE has 21 units, as I was talking about, from the Mexico border all the way to Oregon. We staff fire engines, bulldozers, aircraft. We have inmate firefighter hand crews as well as firefighter hand crews. We staff hazmat units. We are still in the law enforcement business. The state fire marshal works through us, and we have forest practice personnel which go out and they're actual foresters and see the health of the forests and tell us where we need to pay special attention when we have the die-off with the different oaks and those types of trees. Currently during fire season, CAL FIRE has approximately 9,000 field employees. So that would be fire personnel out on the ground putting out fires. And then there's approximately 3,000 additional support staff that would be office folks, people that work in Sacramento, our dispatchers, and our what we call D-space inspectors, folks that go out and check the defensible space around homes. So this is one of our handouts that is on the CAL FIRE website. I just wanted to throw this up just to get people to see what our little handouts look like. So if you go to, if you do a Google search for CAL FIRE, and then you go under Defensible Space, you'll see these different handouts. The next section that I wanted to get into a little bit, because I think this is where folks want to get the most information, is the defensible space and what we need to do to prepare our homes to harden them for any kind of wildland incident that impacts that Rossmoor area. So here's the website. I'll forward this email to you, or I'll forward this to you in an email, Tom, so that way you can send it out to people if they want to read through it. So we have different zones when we talk about defensible space, and just remember these zones, they fall within each other. So zone 0 would be inside zone 1 and zone 1 would be inside of zone 2. So some of the numbers kind of overlap. So you want to remove any dead and dying material 0 feet to 5 feet and use non-combustible materials. So what they're talking about are your plants that you're using around your home. If you're going to put plants up close to your home, don't use anything that is combustible when it comes to vegetation. Don't store firewood in this zone. If you have firewood in your home, try and get it, as far away as possible, just so that way it's not additional fuels that are gonna burn next to your home. Make sure you clean your roofs and gutters. That's a big problem that we have is folks will clean around the base of their homes, but they'll leave that dead vegetation on their rooftops or in their gutters. And if you can clean that out when we come in, it actually help us defend your property. Remove any dead and dying material 0 to 30 feet. Clear any brush around your rooftops. Keep trees clear of each other, so you want to have a good distance in between them, so that way if you do have a fire in one of your trees, it doesn't go from tree to tree. Clean around and under your decks. That's a big thing, is that folks they store things under their decks. Make sure that your decks are clear so you don't have anything that adds additional fuels to these areas. Clear any vegetation 30 to 100 feet. Clear the firewood, like I say, at least 10 feet away around, and make sure that your homes are clear to bare mineral soil. So you want to have dirt around your homes, and then reduce any ladder fuels. And when I talk about ladder fuels, that would be trees that go down to the brush and then the grass. So if you have the grass burning and then it burns that brush that's just a little bit taller next to it, and then that can catch the trees on fire, and then we get those crown fires, and that helps in aiding spreading the fire. Here's some photos of the zones that I was talking about, just so that way you have the ability to kind of see what we're talking about. Once again, this is on the CAL FIRE website. So here's some mowing tips. We often get questions about folks trying to do their due diligence and do their defensible space. So when you're cleaning up around your home, you're mowing, you're weed eating, just make sure that you follow some of these simple rules. Have a shovel, so if you do start a fire or some kind of tool, you can try and knock that vegetation around the burning vegetation, so that we can cut it down, or you can knock the fire down with that tool. Make sure you have some water near you to try and suppress it before it gets too large. One big thing that folks don't realize is that when you go into a red flag event, you have those pre-existing conditions before and after. So just remember, if there's a red flag event coming, try not to do that work 24 hours prior to that red flag event. You always want to check the weather. Here's a website that you can go to get the predictive services. So you get a 7-day outlook of what the weather's going to do. If you're checking those weather sites and you see a relative humidity that is below 30%, don't perform any vegetation management. If you have any winds that are above 10 miles an hour, that is a good way to have a fire spread. And if you have the ability to check the weather every 2 hours, we suggest that. Most people have mobile phones. You can check the weather on your phone. Once you get past 10 a.m., those relative humidities and the winds tend to pick up in the Bay Area, so we often ask people to try and complete the work before 10. If your equipment requires a spark arrestor, make sure that spark arrestor is in place and it's in working order. When you're mowing, keep anything from the bottom of your mower. So a lot of times when you're mowing, you'll get dead vegetation that builds up inside that mower. And once you hit a rock or you hit something hard, it'll catch that built up vegetation inside that mower. And then you have a fire start in that mower and you don't necessarily know it. And as you're moving along, you're dropping little spot fires, which tend to make the fires get bigger faster. Don't top off your equipment with fuel, because that tends to leave a flammable liquid in an area that could also cause your lawn mowing equipment to catch fire, or you spill it and you start mowing and it adds to the potential for a fire. Any person that causes a fire is guilty of a misdemeanor under the Health and Safety Code 13,001. We don't normally cite folks when they start a fire, but I just want to make sure that everybody is aware that that is a possibility. There's a little fire season outlook. Some of the information is a little bit old because they send this out the beginning of the month, and obviously today's the first of the month and I wasn't able to update it. But due to the dry, rainy season, half of Northern California has received less than 50% of the yearly rain totals. The higher elevation snowpacks at its peak were 72% in late March. So just remember that's an average of snow totals, and 72% isn't a whole lot. We obviously want to be over 100%. With the warm, drier weather within the past 3 months, most of the northwestern California borders is now considered to be in a severe or extreme drought conditions. This will cause the fuels to reach critical levels weeks earlier than normal. Warm and drier than average conditions May through August. So like I said, this is updated at the first of the month. So obviously everybody can see that everything's brown or turning brown. So we just got to be careful with any outdoor activities that we're doing. There's significant fire potential will remain consistent from past year or from the past through August. So just remember, August is really where people consider it to be peak fire season, and we are just now getting into peak fire season, even though we've had these large mega fires that everybody's talking about. This is obviously going to change. Here are some of the numbers from previous years. As you can see on the dial, that we didn't have these larger fires up until the last 5 or so years. In my career, a large fire back from, let's say, like 1998 to 2010, that would be like, 100,000 acres. That was a fairly large fire. Now 100,000 acres is an average size fire when they become large. The August complex of last year was just over 1 million acres, and the Dixie fire is approaching that number as well. Here's some information if you have a fire in your home. It's a little basic, but just remember, have a plan if you do have a fire in your home, or you have a wildland fire coming towards your home. Make sure that everybody has a contact number if you're with your family. Make sure that when you are exiting your home that you have a location, and that everybody meets at that location, and make sure that they know that it is imperative that if you do have a fire, that everybody gets to that location, so that way when fire personnel show up, we know that everybody's either out of the building and we don't have to try and figure out where that person's located. Again, make sure you have smoke detectors and they work in your home. I know this is a wildland type of presentation, but I just want to make sure that I hit on these types of things. And that's kind of it for that presentation. So I'll pass it back to you, Tom. And if we have any questions or anything, hopefully that presentation gave you guys some good information, and we can go from there.
Okay, great, thank you. So this question, the first question that came in, is probably going to be either for Chris or Brian. During poor air quality, we are told it's better to stay indoors than to be outside. And if we are outside, we're supposed to wear an N95 mask. If you don't have a filter in your home or a good HVAC, is that still the correct thing to do, is to stay in your home?
I'm going to say anytime you can shelter in place is good. Obviously, if you have evacuation warnings or a notice, then I would say leave your home. At that point, the fire's coming towards you. You want to leave early and often. But yeah, staying indoors, changing those filters if you have them. A lot of HVACs don't necessarily have a place to put a filter, but they sell at Home Depot the kind of filters that you can cut yourself, and I would say replace them once a week when you can. But yeah, definitely stay indoors when it's recommended.
The next one, this is for you, Fran. What are instructions for Rossmoor folks who don't have nearby family to go to, or those who are disabled and need help to evacuate? I know the second one you might not be able to answer, but what should they do if they don't have family nearby that they can go to?
That is a problem, Tom. It is a consistent problem, and I'm hearing more and more that it continues to be a problem. What we're asking coordinators to do and the local neighborhood teams is to make certain that every resident, despite their medical challenges or wherever they find themselves in terms of transportation, to make an evacuation plan. I think we need, Rossmoor as a whole needs to work on that. We need to work together to make certain that residents here who do not have transportation or transportation challenged have a way to get out when a mandatory evacuation is called. I don't have an easy answer for it. It keeps me up at night. It's a problem.
Okay, the next question. I'm sorry.
Tom, one of the quick things I just want to say, I know that the communities like Rossmoor are usually fairly tight. They're close-knit communities. One of the things that we try and emphasize is that know your neighbors. And if your neighbors have the ability to help you evacuate, you get with your neighbors and you try and work out a plan and add them to that, so that way they can help you evacuate if you don't have the ability to do it yourself.
Very, very good point. Okay, the next question is going to be either for Brian or Chris. How are they managing the wildlands near us? For example, the Los Trompas wilderness to the south. It seems to be a bigger threat based on the vegetation and the dense vegetation that is located there.
I will say that we are doing the best we can with what we have funding wise. We do put projects out every year that the governor has funded. It's just trying to keep up with all the different projects over the years. We've had some issues with environmental issues, so trying to get out and get what we call a CEQA to be able to do that vegetation management, burn or chip or those kinds of things. So we are doing it. It's a slow process, but we are trying to do the best we can with managing them, and I don't really have a great answer for that one.
Okay, here's another one for either Chris or Brian. With the drought, where do you get the water to fight the fires?
It goes back to we try and find creeks or reservoirs or municipal fire or water systems, you know, like your hydrants and those kinds of things. But it is getting tough. You look at a good one to check out would be if you look at the Hetch Hetchy, just go and Google the Hetch Hetchy water levels, and you'll see that it is significantly low, but we do have ways to get water. It's just tough sometimes to do it.
Okay, Fran, back to you on this one. How many Rossmoor neighborhoods have EPO coordinators? I guess mutuals.
We are in the process, Tom, of updating our roles, our EPO coordinators and neighborhood teams. I would say at this point, we know probably for certain that half of our entries are covered with a coordinator or a co-coordinator. Anybody out there who's in Rossmoor land, who's a resident and would like to volunteer, get in touch with me. Go to rossmoorepo.org, and my email is at the bottom of the homepage, and we welcome any residents who would like to organize their teams. Chief Giambroni is absolutely correct. It is the neighborhoods and the social cohesion that we build in our neighborhoods. It is the best tool we have in our first aid kit come a major disaster emergency. So please get in touch with me. We would love to. We need to up the number of people who are involved in every entry and every street that does not have an entry. So join EPO and help us out.
Great. All right, Alana, this next question is for you. What types of options do we have to shelter our pets during an emergency evacuation?
Yeah, the most ideal scenario is that your pet goes with you or to a pre-planned evacuation place that you have in mind, a friend or family. Worst case scenario is the Contra Costa Animal Services will either open their shelter or an emergency shelter for animals to house during the evacuation event. So ideally an animal owner can bring them there. If for whatever reason they can't bring the animal when they evacuate themselves, once fire has determined the area to be safe, Animal Services will come in and evacuate the animal to that shelter to be reunited with its owner.
Great. Okay, next one's for you, Brian. I love this question because it just shows how generous and caring our community is. If funding is a challenge, does CAL FIRE have a donation campaign that they can donate to?
No. Don't ever send any money to anybody that says they are with CAL FIRE, because we never ask for money.
Yeah.
I wish we could have money funded directly to our general fund, but as much as the citizens like to help us, we don't have the ability to accept donations. People like to bring food and those kinds of things, snacks and treats. I'm not going to turn people away for that kind of stuff, but when it comes to money, don't ever give money to anybody that says they're with CAL FIRE, because they probably aren't.
And then Fran, you've drawn up a lot of other questions. So this one comes back to you. Do you have a list of neighborhood EPOs?
Yes, we do. We keep a list. We do indeed. It is proprietary to us. We don't hand it out to anybody. So all my team members, residents need not be concerned that they'll be barraged with emails from other parties. It stays inside EPO.
Right. And since we're getting a lot of questions about EPO, Rossmoor's EPO, is there a place they can go to get more information about EPO and everything that EPO does and the stuff they advise?
Yes, indeed. Our mission, for those of you who do not know, our singular core mission, we're the only resident volunteer group. We're 29 years old with a storied history here in Rossmoor. And our core mission is to help ready our neighbors to prepare themselves. And I hope you hear it as I have said it. We ready our neighbors to prepare themselves and their households for a major disaster or emergency here in Rossmoor or area-wide. We're also here to help organize our neighbors and neighborhoods should a shelter-in-place order be called by civil authorities. So those are the two main things we do. We have a wonderful website, rossmoorepo.org. And for residents, there is a starred link on the front page, the home page, and it's for resident resources. Please go there. And if you're trying to find out how to make a grab and go bag, we've got the information. We have you covered. We have CAL FIRE covered. We have CON FIRE covered. We have GRF and the EOP, your emergency operations plan, covered. There are links there galore. And again, if any resident here in Rossmoor wants specific information, I welcome any inquiries and I answer them very promptly. Thank you.
Great. Okay, the next one is for Bruce with the Walnut Creek Police Department. An evacuation of Rossmoor and surrounding neighborhoods will create gridlock on exit roadways. For example, Rossmoor Parkway, Olympic Boulevard, Tice, all of those you can throw in there. Further complicating the evacuation. What plans does the police department have to handle such a mass evacuation?
Well, when the police department would respond to such a critical incident like this, our first response is to assist CAL FIRE, go to the Unified Command Post and get our assignments. Part of this would be traffic control. We'd be dispatching our officers to the areas that need it best to assist with traffic control to aid in the evacuation. So depending on resources on that day, we will be getting every person possible to help with traffic control and evacuation, especially in the areas where it does bottleneck. And so we will concentrate our resources to those locations.
And then is there other agencies you guys can call on if there is such a critical incident for help? I mean, I'm thinking traffic control in many intersections. Is there other agencies you call on?
Most definitely. We rely heavily. We have a great CERT team for the city of Walnut Creek, and we do cross-train our CERTs, our volunteers, in helping us with traffic control. So in the need of more resources, we will basically do a call out to CERT. They will probably already be there in an incident like this, but yeah, we would call them out to help us with such traffic control.
Okay. We did have someone from CERT, speaking of CERT, actually Harris Greenberg wrote in about the animal resources. And he said, Rossmoor area CERT does have animal resources and temporary holding pen area designated as the pickleball courts near Creekside. If you want more information, please speak to Marsha McLean with CERT. Okay. And Chris, this might be you or you, Brian. This is, where are the areas in Rossmoor that are the most vulnerable to wildfire?
I mean, obviously the homes that are on the adjacent edges of any of the wildland are going to be areas that need to be focused on, and trying to get fuel mitigations around those areas are going to be tough, for a lack of better words, just for the fact that they tend to be regional parks, and regional parks are the ones that are going to have to come in and do any kind of vegetation or abatement in those areas. So I would say if you're in those areas and your homes border a regional park or something like that, then I would try and contact regional parks if they're having issues with keeping that vegetation management close to the homes.
In addition, the last couple of years, we've had some known fires along and underneath some of the PG&E transmission lines. We have worked well with them to keep them informed when those occur. They're evaluating their infrastructure in addition to also doing extra mitigation steps underneath those transmission lines and at the bottom of those poles. I know there's been certain poles that, due to either squirrels or birds, that have started some small fires. We've been able to extinguish them, but that's also because mitigation efforts have been done early on in the season. We've identified that through our weed abatement program, and that's what's been allowed to keep those fires that have occurred relatively small, is through the mitigation efforts that have been done underneath those high-risk areas.
Great. And just so everybody knows, PG&E was out here last month. That was in regards to the grass fire that happened here. And that's one thing that they did identify, is looking at more things that they could do with the poles to prevent bird strikes and squirrel stuff. So they said that is coming. So hopefully they'll be here soon. And I know they've already done it to many poles already. Okay, the next question actually is probably going to be for me. We have only one exit. What is being done regarding having one exit in case there is a fire evacuation or any kind of evacuation in Rossmoor? Well, first, what we're doing right now is actually we're in the process of working with Walnut Creek Police Department and the private landowners of those access points that both Contra Costa County Fire, CAL FIRE, San Ramon Valley Fire uses as entry points to come into Rossmoor. We're working with Walnut Creek PD, GRF, and those private property owners to set up a memorandum of understanding so that we can use them in a disaster or in an emergency situation. Once we set that up, it kind of allows us also to do more training and practice drills on them. It's just a better way of operating. So that is what's going on. And just so you know, there are 9 emergency access points into Rossmoor. In addition, GRF has also hired a outside firm to do a study on those 9 to see which ones are the most viable to create into a more permanent emergency egress. And some more information about that will be coming. So far, just so you know, Stanley Dollar is probably the best right now that we have. And then probably we're also looking at Gray Eagle right now as another possibility. And what they do is on these surveys or these studies is to see how viable it is, how much it will cost to do it, and if the property owners are willing to partner with us with those. So that is it on the exits. Actually, I have another one. Bruce, you're up again. I've been told that the exit lanes will be closed to allow only emergency vehicles to come in if there is a wildfire or an evacuation situation. Is that true?
The exit lanes are dedicated for emergency personnel to go in and out to help with evacuation. So they won't be necessarily closed. I mean, if we need those lanes to help the evacuation process, we would use them. But primarily, we're using it for emergency personnel to assist with the evacuation.
So just so everybody understands, so with the 4 lanes that we have, 2 coming into Rossmoor and 2 going out, would you reserve the incoming lanes for emergency vehicles? Is that what I'm understanding?
I think the best answer for that one is going to depend on the situation at that time, at that moment, depending how many resources is coming in at one time and how many people we're able to get out at that moment. So I think it's fluid, depending on what lanes we specifically use. or pick for that day. I just know that we're going to be using those lanes for emergency personnel, to my knowledge.
Okay, next question. I think this might be yours, Rebecca. Has the Diablo Fire Safe Council received its 2021 funding yet for our Rossmoor grant proposals? I'm not sure if
No.
you know anything about that. No.
Sadly, no. But we have a lot of projects that are on the list, and so they'll let us know if more funding comes through. I know CAL FIRE opened up a ton of funding for organizations like the Diablo Fire Safe Council. So it's likely, I would imagine, that they will get it eventually, but it takes some time. So we've got some projects that are open right now that we opened up 2 years ago, and we are on their list, and every once in a while they send us an updated list, but it will take time for that money to come through.
Well, I can't pass up this next thing. It's actually kudos to Rebecca and her crew and the management of GRF. So maybe Rebecca, you might be able to add a little bit more, but kudos to the fire breaks that were done here. Can you tell the audience how many times do we do those fire breaks and what are they used for? Any other information you can provide?
There are 2 different types of fire breaks here. There are the disking fire breaks, which are used to divide up our parcels. So each parcel is divided up in 5-acre segments, which is designed to keep fire from spreading in the case that we do end up with a fire on a parcel. And that's taken care of by Martin, so I can't take any credit for that, but I will let him know. The other type of fire break we have is really just the defensible space, where we weed eat 100 feet out from buildings every year. That's done typically in May. It depends on the weather, and we get information from the fire department about when that deadline is, and it's a moving target every year, because if you get moisture late into the year, you get regrowth and you have to do it twice. So that is done once a year. As needed, though, we will go back and touch it up if that is needed. Typically it isn't, but in some cases it is.
Okay, great. Got another one for you. Since here in Rossmoor, we don't manage the exteriors of our homes. Obviously that's provided by mostly MOD here for GRF. Is Rossmoor doing everything on the CAL FIRE defensible space limits?
So yeah, I answered this question privately to the inquirer, but let me just read it for the benefit of everybody. Yes, Rossmoor meets all CAL FIRE requirements for defensible space. However, it is up to the mutuals to make any supplemental improvements, which is largely the removal of juniper and or failing Monterey pines within the 0 to 30 foot and 30 to 100 foot defensible space zones. This is part of a 5-year plan, which can be found on the Rossmoor landscaping website. I'm happy to post up a link. If people just want to click on it, it'll take you straight there. But it is expensive work, and not all residents are happy about it. You know, if you take away a person's tree that has provided them shade for as long as they've lived here, even if it's an improvement in terms of fire, it may not be an improvement to that person's quality of life. So there is a lot of working with each mutual individually to look at certain situations to figure out what can and can't be done. Right now we're in sort of the low-hanging fruit stage, where we're doing everything we can that is not going to really negatively affect people. The next phase will probably be much more difficult and perhaps a lot more expensive. So I said many mutuals and projects have already completed this work. Some of the smaller mutuals and projects are totally done with all of their juniper removal and are phasing out their Monterey pines. But there are others still that are making progress more slowly. And if you live in a mutual or project and you feel that within particularly that 30-foot zone within buildings, you have highly combustible material, which is generally juniper and Monterey pines. What you want to do is you want to be in touch with your landscape representative, and they work with us to try and make a plan within budget to phase all of that material out. And yeah, again, so this is all covered in the 5-year plan, which, you know, is different mutuals are on a different path and a different level of progress on that. But I will post the link so that anybody can access it at any time.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, this one's for Chris Bachman or maybe Brian. In an emergency where people cannot escape Rossmoor, for example, a Santa Rosa incident where fire is overcoming their homes and they can't escape, they can't get out of the Rossmoor exit. Everything's blocked up and they can't escape. We've been directed to go to the golf course. What about the air quality on the golf course? For example, carbon monoxide during a large wildfire. Is it safe for us to be on the golf course if there's a large wildfire?
Obviously, being in an area that's open that doesn't have a lot of combustible materials like the golf course would be a perfect location for people to go. Air quality is going to be bad. Folks that have oxygen tanks or things like that, if you can keep them in a vehicle, that's going to help. But for the most part, getting yourself to a location where you're out of the way of the fire's path and not being around combustible materials is going to be the best thing. So I would think at that point that air quality is probably the least of our concerns, but getting you to a safe location where you're not going to be affected by the actual impingement of fire is better.
And I'd like to add to that what we're doing now is preparing for an evacuation, an organized evacuation planning route that would eliminate the type of scenario that the Rossmoor residents continue to ask this question. And that's why we're dividing up Rossmoor into zones. We're educating everyone on what their zones are, and it'll be a systematic approach when and if Rossmoor is ever asked to evacuate. It's the same with a city. You're really a city within the city of Walnut Creek, and that we wouldn't approach any other city throughout our county as just saying we want the entire city to immediately evacuate. It's always done in a systematic approach, and that's why we're implementing a program called Zonehaven, which is going to divide your community up into zones, and then warnings will be issued, and then mandatory evacuations will be issued. If at any point you're given a warning, or even before the warning, feel free to leave at any time. But just like what's going on up at the Calgore fire right now with the Tahoe area, most of those residents saw this coming, they were prepared, and once those evacuation warnings started going out, people listened to them and they evacuated in a systematic manner. It didn't cause chaos. It didn't cause anybody to get stuck in the middle of the fire where Highway 50 had to close down, because they listened ahead of time and they heeded those warnings when the official said it's time to evacuate. That's what we're asking, is make sure that you're prepared to evacuate, not when a warning goes out that it's time to start gathering my stuff, that you have all the necessary items that you're going to need to leave your home for several days or potentially a week, depending on how bad it could be, and that you're ready to go. I think that we're seeing more and more that residents of California are now better prepared and they're listening to the warnings. And that's another reason why we're starting to see our fatality numbers, dropping on these large fires, is because residents are listening to the warnings when they're issued early on and they're getting out in a timely manner.
Great, that's excellent. Julie, I saw you nodding your head regarding when Chris was talking about Zonehaven. Did you have something more that you wanted to share about Zonehaven?
Not at all. I actually think he spoke very well about it. And I am very excited about the Know Your Zone campaign, and also with how closely we've been working with the community warning system within our agency to get this all rolled out.
So Julie, we also got a question about, and I know you probably already may have answered it, I know you were typing on it, but they want to know a little bit more about your role at Office of Emergency Services.
So I am an emergency planning coordinator and the representative for Central County. I'm the newest member of the Office of Emergency Services, but I do come from a background as a paramedic and leadership for the past 20 years before I got here about 3 months ago. Basically what we're doing on my end is I work with other representatives with cities and then also with the unincorporated jurisdictions to do all hazards planning and plan everything from preparedness through mitigation, and just kind of help support all of the agencies in coming together so that we can do successful evacuations and plan for other things like earthquakes or tsunamis or all types of hazards. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Great, thank you, Julie. Another question came up regarding the golf course again. I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding about the golf course. Let me see if I can kind of clarify it a little bit. And then by all means, Chris and Brian, jump in to help me, as you guys are the experts on this. We're advocating you go to the golf course only if that's the last resort, meaning the zones have been evacuated, all of that information's been all orderly been done. But however, After all of that, you still can't get out of Rossmoor, and there is a fire like Santa Rosa or Paradise that is just surrounding your building or the community, and you can't get out. What we're explaining to people is, for a last resort, the safest place to be is on the golf course. Just like in Santa Rosa, people ran to the golf course, they jumped in their swimming pools because it was the last resort. So again, we're advocating you go to the golf course as a last resort. That's after the zone evacuations have failed, everything else in our systems have failed, and fire is coming right at you right now. That is the last thing you can do to save yourself. So hopefully I'm clear on that. If not, you can always email me, and we'll continue to beat that drum so people understand that that is our last resort, Chris, do you have anything else, or Brian, on that?
Yeah, you'll be, if you're evacuated, you're gonna receive the notification, and then the other is, you're gonna follow the flow of traffic, and PD is gonna set up a evacuation route that's gonna say, here's where we want you to continue to head. Information is gonna need to be continuous on where is a safe location to shelter, and where are we evacuating people to. The problem is we just can't immediately say that it's going to be this location in Walnut Creek or this location in Lafayette. It depends. Which way is the weather pushing? Which way is the fire coming from? Is going to determine the location that we're going to identify and request that citizens head to for the sheltering location. That information will be passed on. We can add that into the evacuation warnings or evacuation notices when they go out. But just listen to the warnings when they're provided and have a backup plan of, if you don't want to go to the shelter location, is there a family member, a friend that you can go to that's out of that immediate area that you can shelter at their location until it's been lifted.
Okay, Rebecca, one of the question is if you have a lot of pine needles in your gutter and on your roof, who should you call to clean those out, as well as on your decks? And then lastly, can healthy Monterey pines stay?
Yeah, so those are both sort of not black and white answers. The first one for the roofs and the gutters. So your mutual or your project budgets funds each year for periodic cleaning of gutters. That's usually done ahead of the rainy season. I've never seen it budgeted for more than twice a year. So probably what you want to do is talk to your mutual board right now, because all of the mutual boards are in the budgeting process as we speak for about the next month for 2022. And so if more frequent roof and gutter cleaning is something that will make you feel more comfortable, and yes, it will help you resist fire at least a little bit, it's something that will be reflected in your coupon, which may be well worth it. So anyway, you want to talk to your boards to make sure that they're budgeting for that. In regard to the Monterey pines, they are at the end of their lifespan here in this climate. So they are a California native, but they're native to the coast. And so here where it's drier, they live about 50 years. That combined with having a lot less groundwater to draw from, they've become very weak and they get attacked by something called pine bark beetle. And so they are dying very quickly. We've been phasing them out for more than 10 years, but we are starting to see the death accelerate. So for now, healthy Monterey pines can stay. We are trying to phase them out worst first because we can't take them all out at once. Even if we wanted to, it's just extremely expensive and of course traumatic for residents. So short answer, for now, yes, the healthy Monterey pines are staying, but they are being phased out over time.
And the next question is for Bruce, and then maybe Julie or Chris might have a little bit more information if it was to get larger, a critical incident here. But what are the potential shelter locations for us if we do have to evacuate? What does the city provide?
So kind of speaking on what Mr. Bachman was saying earlier, it's really completely dependent on how the fire is moving, how the emergency is moving. Fire and law will do a full evaluation. That includes growing and calling in mutual aid if needed. And at that time, when they're evaluating the emergency, they will determine what the safest and best locations are for those areas where you should shelter in place. And we'll be working with our partners with that, with the Red Cross, the county CERT team, to communicate that information. Information will also be put out through Zonehaven as well as the community warning system regarding where you can go. It is kind of a struggle. I know a lot of people feel much more comfortable with kind of having an idea of where they could go in an emergency, but the reality is when we're in the heat of the moment just trying to evacuate you, we have to determine where the safest location is dependent on what is actually going on in that moment.
And I know in the past, I believe the city mentioned that if it's a small thing and it is not expected to go outside the gates, that they'll use the Tice Valley Gym as a location. I heard of also the community center in downtown Walnut Creek has been a place. So I know the city has several properties that they use, and they also coordinate with Red Cross to open those up when the time comes. And then just so you know, on days of poor air quality, or if there is a heat advisory, GRF historically will open up some of their facilities if they are currently closed. They'll open them up to be cooling centers or fresh air centers. And we do have all of those MERV filters and other things to make sure that the air in those buildings are top quality. Okay, where can you see the record session like this if you've missed it? I'll jump in unless Channel 28 wants to. One is Channel 28. It will be rebroadcasted on Channel 28. Rossmoor EPO also puts a link on their website, and same with Rossmoor News. So those are kind of the areas where you can see it, or if some of your friends have missed it and you want to direct them to that, that would be great. And then lastly, to our panel, thank you again. You guys are a phenomenal panel. I'm not sure if everybody in Rossmoor knows, but I know this panel meets every month to discuss Rossmoor specifically about what plans we're doing. That's been instrumental on the Know Your Zone campaign, the flyers that we've been putting out in the Rossmoor News, and all the other things that we're doing to help our community to evacuate safely. And with that note, since you came to the presentation, I would like to give a little sneak peek about what's next. And here's what's next. So this is your, I think hopefully you guys can see this. There we go. These are the evacuation zone markers or signs that will be on every entry. And if you don't have an entry, it will be on a street sign near your home. So it tells you exactly what zone you're in and what color zone you're in. And so looking at this, so I guess it's backwards for me. WCR stands for Walnut Creek, and that is the information that Julie and her friends at the County Office of Emergency Services has given us based on Zonehaven's nomenclature about what we need to put in there. And then 005 would be your actual zone number. So Rossmoor is broken up into 8 zones. So we have the first Walnut Creek zones, 1 through 8. And then they're also color coded for us to help us. So when you pull into your entry every day, you'll see this sign, if whatever sign is representative of your entry, to remind you what zone you're in and what color zone you're in. The other part of this is really for first responders as well, because in times of critical incident or crisis or chaos, all of that, we want to make it as easy as we can for our first responders to identify where they're at. And so part of this is for that brand new officer or fireman who is in our area and has been told to evacuate Walnut Creek 005, it's the green zone. They'll be able to quickly go through the different streets and find out what zones those there are and evacuate them. So I'm really excited about this. The mutuals are currently voting on this to have them installed. Thank you to GRF. They're the ones who are paying for all of these to be installed. And hopefully you'll start seeing them at your entries and on your signs here real soon. So really excited about that. Okay, so just to finish up, just want to say one last thing is, you know, you are safe living here in Rossmoor. You have a lot of people looking after your safety here in Rossmoor. To Fran's point, you have to be responsible for your own safety as well. You have to take that ownership and follow through with it with a go bag plan, and coming to these meetings are extremely valuable. So again, thank you everybody for coming, and we'll see you at the next one. Take care and be safe.